and welcome to another fun, exciting, brand new episode of Gar Borras' Time Machine. Today we're going to be doing episode number 32, Gar, and we're going to be talking about a great holiday classic. Of course, I'm talking about It's the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown. Now, when I brought this up to you about, hey, what do you think about doing a show on this, Gar? And you told me, oh, man, that's a great idea. You said, man, that brings back childhood memories. So why don't you share with us, like, what do you remember from, seeing the movie for the very first time? And I know you watched it again like me last night, so we'll talk about that too.
When it first aired back in 1966, it was everybody was glued to their TV set.
Yeah.
It was a very highly anticipated, because the Charlie Brown comic strip was like super popular. It was probably the most popular besides Bill Bailey.
Oh yeah.
Those were like the most popular comic strips that you would find in the newspaper, and back in those days, newspapers was where everybody bought a newspaper. It was super cheap. It was like what,
25 cents.
In those days, probably like 10 cents.
Yeah.
And it was the popular way to kill some time. Say, for example, if you were taking some type of train, type of transportation to go to work, you'd be sitting, on your train ride, reading the paper, just killing the time. And so, it was really super popular back in those days, and comic strip writers back in those days were rock stars.
Yeah, now let me ask you, Gar, okay, because again, very much like we've done in some of these past episodes where you talk about kind of the invention of TV. Before we had TV, we had like those old classic movies. Some of them we discussed, like, the 1931 Frankenstein or Dracula, or even, King Kong from the 1930s. And so you had a lot of these films were kind of infancy, and then TV comes along, in the in the early 50s, and people can all of a sudden have stuff to entertain themselves in their living room. And so you're talking about Charlie Brown and the Peanuts gang getting their start in the newspaper. And I remember, like, as a young lad myself, my grandfather and my father, every Sunday they would get the paper, and my grandfather especially, very much, I know you're doing now, would drink his coffee Sunday morning. He'd be reading the comics and reading the rest of the news. That's what you did back in the day. So let me ask you, when this movie premiered in 1966, is this kind of your first time you're seeing Charlie Brown and the rest of the Peanuts gang come to life, if you know what I mean? Because before, you're just kind of seeing it in the newspaper.
Yeah, I think, around that time, I was probably about 10.
Okay.
10 years old. And, 9 or 10 years old.
Yeah.
So I was like the perfect demographics, for Charlie Brown to come on TV. But, there's a couple of things about that particular episode that really kind of set the standard for the Charlie Brown specials. Number one, that music, I think the most popular composition for the Charlie Brown's specials was that music.
Yeah. And do you know who?
That piano thing.
Yeah.
Well, that really is the theme. If you think mentally about the Charlie Brown specials, that musically is a piece of music that immediately comes to mind when you're thinking about the Charlie Brown specials.
And do you know the guy that did most of that music?
Yes.
Vince Girardi.
He was. I forgot his name.
Vince Girardi, and I think he's a jazz.
Like real, some of my favorite music comes from that time which is jazz music from the 1960s.
Yeah, let me tell you, Gar, what I was able to find out about that. I think the guy that did most of music, and then one of the more popular things, like you can even go on YouTube, and they have like for the Christmas special, Charlie Brown Christmas, you can go and check out the whole soundtrack album. You can go on YouTube if you want to purchase it. It's by the guy who does most of that music is a jazz musician. You're right. His name is Vince Girardi, and he did most of that music. And that's kind of interesting because that's the first time, I think, really in the history of television that you've seen where a guy like that really kind of was able to make a living, doing the music for all these, Peanut specials.
Well, really, that I think that piece that I'm talking about is called the theme song Linus and Lucy.
Okay.
He named it after Linus and Lucy, but I'm pretty sure I'm right on that. I could be wrong.
Well, we'll look it up.
But that piece of music is highly associated with Charlie Brown, even though it was really used kind of sparingly during the specials. But and then the other thing that I think the catchphrase that comes from that is good grief.
Good grief, Charlie Brown. Yeah.
That catchphrase comes from that, but also the kicking of the football.
Oh yeah.
That was where that was kind of introduced.
Created. That became.
That is one of the most iconic scenes. From the Charlie Brown specials is Lucy duping Charlie Brown, to get him to kick the field, kick the football, so she could pull it away at the last second and he'd fall on his back.
Yeah, in fact, last night I'm watching the movie for the first time in a couple of years on DVD. There's one scene there, like what you're talking about, that became a trademark in all these Charlie Brown cartoons. And once again, in It's the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown, she kind of goes and plays her trademark trick on Charlie Brown. And at first he's like, "Oh no, I'm not going to fall for you. You're not going to get me this time." And she says, "Calm down, Charlie Brown." Always finds a way to outsmart. "Calm down, Charlie Brown. I'll tell you what. I'm gonna give you documentation that I will not let the football go." "Oh, okay." She's giving me documentation, and then she of course does it anyways. And "Oh well, Charlie Brown. It wasn't notarized, so it didn't count." Okay.
So it doesn't count.
Yeah.
It's
so simplistic.
You just kind of touched on part of the popularity of Charlie Brown because it had the elements in the actual joke writing to appeal to the adults. That kind of went over the children that would watch the special. So it had this, conscious attempt to entertain the adults that would be watching it with their kids, along with entertaining the kids.
Oh, that's so true. I mean, I remember watching it with my grandparents, my mother, my father, and it was just something like the whole family kind of enjoyed. And what's interesting is, again, just so people have a time frame when we're talking. It's the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown. Originally premiered on October 27th, 1966. So it was created and written by Charles M. Schulz. Now, what's interesting about Charles Schulz is I've read many things about him, and I've seen him do a few interviews over the years in my lifetime, and he was talking about how, like Charlie Brown specifically, he kind of based on his own life experiences. And Charlie Brown, you'll hear a lot of people describe as kind of like the saddest, most depressed, kid in the world. And you kind of get a taste of that last night. Like I know I did when I was watching the film. It's the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown, where there's this one scene where everybody, Charlie Brown is so happy because there's going to be a Halloween party, and he finally got invited to a Halloween party. And then Lucy has to kind of come along once again and kind of ruin his great mood. Say, "Oh, Charlie Brown, there was it probably was a mistake. There was two lists made, a list of people that weren't going to be invited, and you were probably on that list, Charlie Brown. It was probably a mistake."
He always got the raw end of the stick, and that was part of his appeal
Yeah, yeah.
to his character.
Yeah.
But then again, one of those catchphrases that comes from watching this.
Yeah.
Whenever you mention to someone else, hey, I just watched, it's the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown.
Yeah.
Immediately people will come back with catchphrases.
Yeah.
And one of those catchphrases that'll come back from that is, I got a rock.
Yeah. Wow.
You know what I mean? It's kind of one of those things, from the special that really became popular and was repeated a lot. But then this phenomenon occurred because there's so many people felt sorry for
poor Charlie Brown. Yeah.
Because he went trick or treating and all he got was rocks.
Yeah.
People, mailed it to the studios a bunch of candy for Charlie Brown because they felt so bad for him.
And see, what's funny is we're talking about a cartoon that is almost 50-something years old, and the funny thing about it is that somebody would take the time, to do that. And people actually, I don't know if it's kids or their parents, they thought it was cute sending those letters to the TV station. But can you imagine? There were people who actually took the time to write letters because they thought this was so real. They thought it was a real little boy that was getting picked on. That just kind of cracks me up. But I think that's the beauty of Charlie Brown. I think it's the simplicity of it. That's why so many people enjoy watching these Charlie Browns. So many people can relate to it. They feel like, I can kind of relate to these characters in this.
Well, it's an undeniable measurement of how popular he was.
Yeah.
Because if he wasn't, that popular, people wouldn't be mailing in candy to a cartoon character. You know what I mean? It really doesn't make sense. But that's why I'm saying it was a phenomenon.
Yeah.
Because people really did that. At that time, they really felt for Charlie Brown. That he didn't get any candy, and like I was saying, it was such just that short line, I got a rock, had such huge impact on the audience that was watching the special. And
then it kind of makes you wonder. This kind of pops in my head because I read the same thing as you did about all these letters, in defense of Charlie Brown. And it almost makes you wonder, and again, this idea just pops in my head as we're talking here. I wonder if that's where they eventually got the idea, to have pet rocks for kids. Instead, maybe it had something to do with this. Well, instead of making, getting a rock a bad thing, let's turn it into something good.
Well, pet rocks do come from that time period, the mid-'60s.
Wow.
So there is a distinct,
connection.
Definite possibility, that could have a tie-in. No, I don't think anybody has any real proof.
No, but it could be.
It is highly coincidental.
Yeah, you could draw that connection, and I don't know it for a fact, but it just popped in my head as we were talking here. Now, it's The Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown is a 1966 American primetime animated TV special based on the comic strip, as you were saying, Peanuts, which was created by Charles M. Schulz, who was born on November 26, 1922, and died on February 12, 2000 from cancer. Among many other animators, Gar, Charles Schulz was considered to be one of the most influential cartoonists ever. And it's kind of amazing. He had a long legacy, a long career, but why I'm so amazed by that is if you look at Charlie Brown, the characters aren't anything really complex or kind of really simplistic, but the fact that all these other animators and cartoonists said, hey, this guy, he was onto something here. I think that speaks volumes.
Well, it was super popular. It was born from a comic strip that was also super popular. It's really hard to find any comic strip other than Bill Bailey that was, as popular or more popular. I mean, it was like at the height of its popularity, just from being in the newspaper. So it just made a real easy, smooth transition to TV.
Yeah, I mean,
the public acceptance was already there. So when they launched, the first special, I'm positive it was a huge success.
So let me ask you, Gar, did you used to watch? I'm assuming, being the age you are, you used to read those, Peanuts comics in the newspaper, and what was it like for you seeing? Okay, because I think when you seen the Great Pumpkin for the first time, it's almost like these characters you read in the newspaper that already meant a little something to you. It's almost like they come to life for the first time, and you're, oh wow, that's what Charlie Brown sounds like. Okay, that's what Snoopy does, and that's what Linus sounds like.
Well, when you're a kid, of course, you're introduced to the comic strips because, there wasn't as much available on TV and stuff, because you got to understand that back in the 1960s, there was just a handful of TV stations that were available, and this is metropolitan Los Angeles, which is one of the largest cities in the United States. I think Los Angeles is probably the second largest, other than New York.
Yeah, you're right about that.
As far as metropolitan cities, the only thing I can say is it was ripe
at the right time.
Back in the 1960s, for all of this, to be, because there really wasn't, like what we consider now.
Yeah.
It's like, you can turn on the TV and, put it on children's networks, and there's many, many different children's networks.
Yeah.
Back in the 1960s, all there was just a handful. I can count on maybe two hands, and not count all the fingers as to how many TV stations that were available. And consider this: when you were outside of metropolitan LA, in other much smaller cities, there was only maybe a couple of TV stations that were available in those areas.
Yeah, I mean, I remember. You and I have discussed this in past episodes, where like talking about old, even how much TV has changed. Old style TV, like kind of have a big box TV, and you'd have the UHF channels, and a big channel there. You want to watch, like Sesame Street, or PBS, or anything educational. You have like one UHF channel, maybe channel 56 here in LA, and then you'd have like channel 2, 13. And you'd have the two little dials. They don't make TVs like that anymore, obviously. But even about, when this premiered in 1966, Gar, the other big thing is, like you said, television only been around maybe at that point 10, 15 years. And at that point, some of your favorite TV shows are just starting to kind of air in color. I mean, that was a big thing too,
Yes, and there were things that the two big sponsors, Dolly Madison and Coca-Cola, were trying to slip in advertisements in the actual Peanuts special, and they were actually stopped from doing it because there were laws, actually brand new laws that were put in place to shield young children from being unwitting, targets for advertisers and stuff.
That's interesting.
So they were actually trying to slip in their advertisements in the Peanuts special.
Yeah, and it's interesting, and that I think has a lot to do with mentioning Dolly Madison. Like, even if you go to the store and you buy any Dolly Madison products, like Twinkies or Ding Dong, sometimes you'll see like Snoopy or Charlie Brown on the wrapping, and that's why. And even talking about Charlie Brown and the gang here, like if you go to even Knott's Berry Farm here in Southern California, great amusement park that's been here for years, you'll see a lot of the Peanuts characters. Like they even have Camp Snoopy. So it's been kind of it's really ingrained in pop culture that way. Where you're not just seeing these characters, on the newspaper and these TV specials, but now you go to an amusement park and they're walking all around. That's how popular these characters are. And just to take that to another level, I mean, that's the whole thing. Like I'm kind of talking about, like if you even look at your favorite comic books, like Batman, Superman, a lot of that stuff before you ever seen what Batman really looked like. We've seen what it looked like in the in the print, in the comic books and even in the newspaper. But then before there was ever a Batman TV show, like it was on radio, and then they thought, okay, we've done radio, now let's see what we can do on TV. And it kind of that's kind of the history of this stuff,
Well, it was all, even though TV had been around for like 10, 15 years, it was still in its infancy.
Oh, sure.
And another childhood memory that comes up to mind, when I think of Dolly Madison, it was really popular for elementary school kids to go on these. There was a name for it.
Field trips.
That was what it was called.
Yeah.
Field trips.
I remember. Yeah.
And they would take a large number of kids from my elementary school that I was going to at that time, and we went to a bakery, and it very well could have been either Helm's Bakery or Dolly Madison.
Yeah.
But it was, I just remember, being a kid and going on field trips, because as a kid, I had never been on a field trip, and it was a huge experience.
Oh, sure.
Going to these places and seeing how this baking was going on. But just being a child back in the 1960s, I don't know if kids really get to experience those kind of things today.
I don't think they do.
But when I was a kid, that was part of being a kid and going to school, was going on these field trips to places like that and seeing how things were being made and just like we don't have to go to school today.
Yeah, it's a special day. Yeah, it's gonna be fun. And you're so right. I mean, they were still doing that when I was a kid, going to school, but I don't think they do it anymore for financial reasons, but
or even insurance reasons, stuff like that, because there's
that.
There's a lot of things that but that's why I wanted to point that out, because I have a feeling that kids nowadays don't get to experience it. But anybody listening to this that's from my time period will definitely remember that was part of our childhood.
Oh, sure.
And it's just kind of a little bit of a side note to this whole Great Pumpkin thing, because Dolly Madison was
associated with
a sponsor for it, and that's what kids from the 1960s were experiencing. So it's kind of it's interesting to know about the backdrop.
Oh, sure it is.
Just about the special, but also different things that were going on during that time, because also in the 1960s the mini skirt.
Oh, sure.
Sure. That year, 1966, the mini skirt was also introduced, which is really back in the 1960s, that was hugely controversial.
Especially talking about
the same person that I didn't know this, but the same person that invented the mini skirt also invented hot pants.
Wow.
And both of those styles will never go out of style. They will always have their cycle where they will go back in style.
Yeah, I go out today, still see women out in public walking around dressed like that. A lot of women wear mini skirts, and you do see some people from time to time wearing hot pants. I never really went out of style. But what's interesting, like you said, back at the time, for something like that to be kind of a new kind of fashion at the time, it was really back in the day. Women did not show their legs like they do today, and it was like oh my God, what is that? I even remember as a kid, you would see those pantyhose commercials on TV, and that used to, I mean, even when you go in the store, they sell those, but you don't see them as much. It's not as advertised. I don't know why, but it just, like you're saying, this is kind of what was going on in the world back then.
Well, yeah, and Star Trek actually debuted in 1966.
Wow, yeah, you came from.
There was a lot of interesting things that were also going on at the same time.
Yeah. And
it was the 1960s. It really is a decade that stands out because there were so many dramatic changes that happened back in the 1960s. It was a very volatile decade.
Well, 1966, okay, which is when this Great Pumpkin Charlie Brown premiered. Okay, it's also kind of around the time of Vietnam Wars going on. It predates, because like Woodstock doesn't even happen until 1969, so it even predates all that. But it was during the hippie time when people are wanting to love and have peace and all that. So that was what was kind of going on at the world at the time.
It was a really interesting decade, and there was just so many changes that occurred. During that time, and so many iconic things happen. Like I was saying, Star Trek.
Yeah.
And there were other TV shows that came on during that time. So it was a really interesting decade. But getting back to the pumpkin, it was just a kind of an infancy of even cartoons.
Yeah. What's funny is, like, I'm watching it. It's been a couple of years since I've seen it last. Watched for the first time in a couple of years last night. I felt like a kid again watching it. I'm 51 years old, and I still love watching every time I see it. It's like it's only like a 30-minute special, but that was the only thing I thought, oh man, it's over already, kind of. But at the same time, I think what makes it such a great film, Gar, is it's timeless, and also the fact that around Halloween time, we all kind of typically think, okay, it's Halloween time, we want to get freaked out, we want to get scared, we want to watch great classic horror films, but that's not what this is. And I think this is the first kind of thing that was really created for children, where you do have something kind of we're going to have a Halloween special, and it's much more than just kids going out trick-or-treating. And what I love about, I love the fact that Charles Schulz was so kind of, had such an imagination that who would think of, there's no such thing as a Great Pumpkin. I mean, this is the first time you see something like this for children, where let's find some fun way, we don't have Santa Claus, we don't have the Easter Bunny here, but let's create something for kids. And that's the whole point of this movie. Linus is like, oh, the Great Pumpkin, oh, you're crazy, but he really believes in it,
Well, the 1960s also was when kids enjoying going out and trick-or-treating was at its apex.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? It was just at the height of what kids could enjoy, and that lasted for a long time. I'd say it started waning, towards the end of the 80s and early 90s. Because kids nowadays don't get to enjoy what I used to be able to enjoy in going out and trick-or-treating and doing that whole thing and going from house to house. It just had so many elements that made it so fun. Number one,
it was
getting the candy.
Yeah.
What makes a kid more happy than getting candy? Nothing other than Christmas.
Free candy, yeah.
Number two, being able to time when you were a kid at that time.
I had to go to bed by 9 o'clock.
At night you came in.
Yeah.
You know, it was time to come in. It was time to eat dinner. It was time to get ready, cleaned up and ready for bed and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
You know, and then the fact that you got to wear these costumes.
Yeah.
You know, those costumes back in the 60s were so uncomfortable with those plastic masks.
Yeah.
And it was really not comfortable. But you ask any kid if they would rather not wear that costume or wear the costume, every kid would say, "Give me the costume."
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? You know, so it was just at the height of its popularity, and just being able to go from house to house and being able to come back home with this bag full of candy. And there was a lot of times, that kids went out without their parents because at that time it was considered safe to do that.
Yeah, that's the thing.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's the thing.
There were so many elements of going out and trick or treating, that no longer kids get to experience, and as an older adult, it kind of makes you sad, because the generations now don't get to experience those things to the way that I was able to enjoy it as a kid.
Yeah, like I was asking a friend of mine recently. She has a grandson that's just a little kid, and I was asking, "Oh, you guys going to take him trick or treating this year?" "Oh, we're just going to go. We're kind of worried about dope, people putting dope or whatever in the candy, so we're just going to go around the neighborhood and go to the local park."
Well, it all didn't start out that way. It started out with people serving candies with safety pin or
needles, yeah,
or razor blades.
Yeah, I remember that.
It started with people doing that.
Yeah.
And then that really started putting a damper. And I don't know if it really even happened. I think it very possibly could have just been started by a rumor. I think that it's the possibility of it actually happening is very high, because you always have, in a society when you have millions of people, you're always going to have that one that's messed up in the head, that's going to do something like that. Just for the rest of us, we scratch our head and think, what in the hell would make you think of something like that?
Oh yeah, I believe.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it very well could be a rumor, or it very well could be real. But I was around during that time when that element got introduced, and it started scaring people about going from house to house, and it really had a huge effect on it, and it just never waned. It just started getting worse and worse about the dangers of going house to house, because I remember that parents would not allow their kids to eat any candy that wasn't wrapped.
Yeah, it's
sealed. You know what I mean? And parents would go through the candy to make sure that the candy was safe for their kids before the kids could eat their candy.
Yeah, I know. I know exactly what you're talking about, because my parents were the same way when we would go. In fact, my father and mother would tell us, "Okay, before you guys eat anything, we got to check it." And that's exactly what they told us. Is okay, anything that's open, we're going to just throw it away. And I think you're right that I think more people, or there are more good people in the world than bad. There's a few bad apples out there, and they ruin it for everybody. And I do think you're probably right. Maybe it happened, in a small town somewhere, and it got reported on the news, and then the news media has a way of kind of blowing everything up. But it kind of terrified everybody, and that's just kind of a sad state of affairs. Now, another thing I found interesting in regards to It's the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown. Again, it premiered on October 27, 1966 on CBS, when it would re-air every year. Once a year, they would replay it for several years. until the year 2000. The very year Peanuts creator Charles Schulz died, ABC got the rights to the holiday classic in 2001. And if you remember, Gar, I sent you an email last week telling you something about. I seen somebody put something up online about that the Great Pumpkin was going to be on CBS, and I thought, oh, great, it'd be fun to tune in. Then I find out that was an old poster somebody had posted, but come to find out, they stopped airing it every year on TV because like ABC has the rights now, and they would rather air it on their streaming service, which I don't really understand. Why?
Well, it's actually, I did, find out about that.
Yeah.
The Apple Plus
owns it.
Apple TV Plus bought the rights.
Okay.
And so they are airing it.
Yeah.
But they also on the day before Halloween and Halloween Day, Apple Plus is making it available for everyone to stream on those 2 days.
Yeah.
So maybe it's not available on the networks because the networks don't own the rights right now. The last network before Apple Plus was ABC, but Apple Plus now owns the rights. But I think it's kind of sad because now it's just exclusive to only people that have Apple TV Plus.
That's what I don't like.
But it was really gracious of them to make it available for anyone to stream on those 2 days. I think that's a gracious move on
compromise, a good compromise, I guess. And then interesting thing too. As I have said a couple times, it aired originally on October 27, 1966. And do you know what was right before this holiday special? That the very first time, what was on TV that day?
Oh yeah, I found My Three Sons. I used to watch that when I was a kid. Yeah.
So that again, just to give people an idea of what was going on in TV-wise 1966. And I found out it was nominated for a 1966 Emmy Award, but I guess it didn't win. And another cool plot or a line that Linus says when everybody's kind of poo-pooing the Great Pumpkin. He's talking to Charlie Brown and his sister Sally, and he's like, I realized there's 3 things you don't talk about with people. Number 1, you don't talk about religion. Number 2, you don't talk politics. And number 3, you don't bring up the Great Pumpkin. And that's kind of, if you look at today's world, that's kind of still kind of true,
Well, when I heard that line, I embraced it fully.
Yeah.
I think it's a great line, and it just shows you how some things don't change, because that's a line that was derived from the mid 1960s, and it still stands strong today.
Yeah, and then I found out. It said it's the Great Pumpkin. Charlie Brown originally aired for children all over the world. Oh yeah, that's what you're talking about, where people sent letters, and because poor Charlie Brown didn't get any candy, so that was another kind of fun aspect. And then I love the fact that Linus is so into believing in this, Great Pumpkin, and everybody else telling, oh, there's no such thing. And it kind of ends unresolved because by the end of the movie, the Great Pumpkin still hasn't come, and he's starting to be a doubting Thomas like everybody else. He's like, no, I'm becoming like it. I'm sorry, Great Pumpkin, I didn't mean it, And that's how it kind of ends.
Well, he's he says if instead of when.
Yeah.
And he just got all freaked out, because he thought that the Great Pumpkin heard him questioning it, because if you say if, that means it can be questioned, but he truly, takes a leap of faith.
Yeah, and that's what,
in the Great Pumpkin. It's just that's really the best way to describe it. He took that leap of faith.
It's kind of like when your parents tell you, hey, when you're a kid, hey, if you don't go to bed tonight, Santa Claus can't come and bring the presents. you better turn off all the lights and leave Santa 2 cookies on the table and some milk or whatever. Okay, Mom, Dad, I'll go to bed so Santa Claus can come. And it's funny, like in watching the film, I did the research for today's show before I actually sat down and watched the film. And as I'm watching the film, I'm looking for some stuff that I came across, like Linus's letter. It says, in his letter to the Great Pumpkin, Linus says, "You might get discouraged because more people believe in Santa Claus than you. Let's face it, Santa Claus gets more publicity, but being number 2, you perhaps need to try harder." This was in reference to popular 1960s advertising slogan for Hertz Rent-A-Car. But again, it's so...
Dude, let me go into that.
Yeah.
Because that was true.
Yeah.
Okay. Here, to put it into context, because I was around back then,
Yeah.
and, Hertz Rent-A-Car was number 1.
Yeah.
And their competitor was Avis.
Yeah.
Avis was number 2. And so what Avis's, advertised, whoever they had that they hired for their advertisement
slogan,
to come up with a slogan, Avis, whoever that advertisement company that came up with the slogan, it was pure genius, because they came up with a slogan that would actually turn being number 2 into an advantage.
Wow, okay, yeah.
And that advantage was their slogan is because they're number 2, they try harder.
Yeah, okay, wow, that's cool.
And that was their slogan. They try harder because they're number 2. And that became very appealing to the public because now the public perceived them as number 2 not being a bad thing, but being number 2 made them try harder, which made it a better customer experience when you went to Avis.
Yeah, that's why I love doing these episodes we do, Gar, because...
It really made a difference, dude. It really made a difference. They jumped huge, in nipping at Hertz's heels, because Hertz was number 1 and they were strong number 1.
Yeah.
But after they came up with that advertisement slogan, man, it had a huge impact on the popularity of Avis.
Yeah.
So, and that's the reason why they chose to do that, because it was a huge thing at that time, and that whole thing being out of context nowadays. So that's why I felt that I had to explain that it was a real thing at that time.
I'm glad you did, because again, that's what I love about doing these episodes. We do the research and we come across this stuff. I mean, watching it initially, probably not even aware of that, and then you find out, like, again, Hertz Rent-A-Car was a big company for several years. I mean, they're still around, but they don't advertise like they used to. But even like in the 80s, they were big. Because you remember they had O.J. Simpson doing all those commercials then,
Yeah, they were number 1, solid number 1. So it's to really understand that joke, you got to understand what's behind it. And, and that's why, like I said, that's why I felt I needed to.
I'm glad you did, because you explained a lot better than even when I was reading it. And here's another funny thing you might not have noticed. In my research, I came across this. It says, after Linus writes his letter to the Great Pumpkin, he walks into his family living room where his sister Lucy is sitting in front of a TV reading the TV guide, which featured Lucy on the cover. I mean, how kind of coy and interesting is that you're watching this cartoon, you don't even realize. But because I read this, I was looking for it all the way through the film, and when it comes to that scene, oh yeah, she is on the cover of a TV guide. I mean, wow.
Well, now here's another thing from 1966 that I don't think a whole lot of people really know about this particular special, the Great Pumpkin special.
Yeah.
The Snoopy going into that battle scene, between him and the Red Baron.
Yeah.
That was a real kind of leap away from the whole storyline, because it really had nothing to do with Halloween, and it really had nothing to do with the Great Pumpkin.
Kind of a nod to World War II.
At that time, a lot of people don't know that the public really embraced Snoopy because of that whole thing of him doing that air battle with the Red Baron, and that whole scene, was. I guess what they talk about, what do they call it?
It's like,
when people would work in offices and they would go to the water machine.
Water cooler. Water cooler.
It was considered talk around the water machine. God.
Water cooler. Water cooler.
For that.
Water cooler.
When you go get some water and at work, and then you're standing there and you'd be talking to a coworker, when you're getting a water. It was a
water
thing back in that time.
Water cooler. Water cooler.
That was one of those conversations that people would have. Talking about Snoopy and fighting against the Red Baron. That scene became extremely popular at that time.
Yeah. Now, Gar. Okay. The term you're referring to is the water cooler.
Yes. I couldn't think of that to save my life.
Yeah.
But it was water cooler conversation.
Yeah, I mean,
people don't know about that because it's really not something that people do nowadays.
Well, I mean, I even remember it.
But back in those days, that was a thing. You go get a water when you were at work, and you stop at the water cooler and have a conversation about something. And that scene was one of those conversations at that time.
I mean, I remember, like, in my younger days too, that they used to hear them say stuff like going to the water cooler, hey, did you see the episode of Happy Days last night? Oh man, it was cool, and the Fonz did this, and
water cooler conversations. Yes.
Yeah, so that's what that is. And according to and it says according to the original recording reels label, but Classic Holiday was going to originally be called Big Pumpkin Charlie Brown. So I guess somebody was saying if you go check today, even the original label was labeled something else, and then they changed the name to it's the Great Pumpkin Charlie Brown. So again, one thing I think that we enjoy about not just it's the Great Pumpkin Charlie Brown, but all the Charlie Brown cartoons and specials in general is it's simplistic. People you don't have to think too hard. It's not like anything you have to really. You can just watch it and enjoy it for what it is. A lot of people, because it's so simple, they can relate to it. And you watch, like even watching last night. I mean, you don't really question if there's a Great Pumpkin, because I know watching as a kid or even last night, I want to believe in the Great Pumpkin. Something I want. You don't question that. Okay, Lucy is watching TV and she's got a TV guide it's got her picture on the cover. You don't question that there's no other furniture in the living room. You don't question that parents aren't around. These kids are getting kind of just do whatever the hell they please. It's a fun TV thing, and you don't really question anything.
Well, each character, in being older now and looking back, each character was a particular character that had a characteristic that was a popular social characteristic. Say, for example, Lucy and her mean, devious side.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Linus and his blanket. Charlie Brown's sister that's got a crush, the girl that's got a crush on the boy. But so they're all characters, but they also have characteristics that are, show different characteristics, different social characteristics.
Yeah, and then you got.
If you notice they all have a character, but they also have a characteristic of that character. Like
Peppermint Patty's another one. Crazy about Charlie Brown, and he does not have a clue. He thinks she's just his friend. Got a ton of freckles. Not kind of looks more kind of like a tomboy than an attractive girl. But that's kind of like you said, her character where she fits in. Instead of calling him Charlie, hey Chuck, a little more loud and obnoxious. And in fact, it's kind of funny you saying how real some of these characters look. Peppermint Patty, I'm not the only one that said this, but I've seen a lot of people on TV even say Joe Biden's former press secretary Jen Psaki reminds a lot of people of Peppermint Patty if you look at her.
You can't forget Pigpen.
Yeah.
What a mess. I think it was cute when he made his entrance in there, and basically he was thinking that nobody would recognize him in that costume, and immediately everybody recognized him because he was always the dirty kid.
Yeah, in reference to Pigpen,
and there was society always had that kid that was always dirty.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it was just, they were all innocent characteristics, but they were all social characteristics. That it was part of the whole thinking behind Charles Schulz and coming up with these characters.
Yeah, and like even in regards to Pigpen, I was reading that of all the Charlie Brown specials, this was the only one that featured Pigpen in glasses. I don't know why.
Yes.
I don't know why that is, but that's kind of an interesting thing to pick up on.
Yes, because he never wore glasses after that.
And then you had, of course, Schroeder, the guy that Lucy was crazy about, and he couldn't really stand her. I think they had a love-hate thing, and he was always playing his piano, and she was always checking it out and kind of driving him.
And there's always that kid that's involved in music.
Yeah, and I know you can kind of relate to that, but yeah, that's what made this so fun to watch again, and I just it's a fun little thing to watch every Halloween. It takes me back to really when I was a kid.
Well, here's another thing, that I just latched onto. That from now on, I completely forgot about it, but it just resurfaced. In this episode, they call it tricks or treats.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And I really like that.
Yeah.
Tricks or treats.
Yeah.
So I'm just calling it that from now on. It's I love it.
Yeah, and I think people need to enjoy these Charlie Brown specials, these holiday specials, these movies and things we love to watch around the holiday times, and don't really go looking for. I mean, another thing I was reading online recently, like in reference to Charlie Brown Christmas or something, is where somebody was bringing up online like Charlie Brown is. They're all having dinner around the dinner table, and the little black kid Franklin is by himself. Why is that? I don't think when they were making the movie that they were trying to say anything racially. I don't know, but I don't watch it and get that.
Well, what was socially acceptable about those things was very, very
different.
Very different.
Yeah.
Completely different. Than the way it is now. But it's just there's whenever we look back, we're always going to see things in TV, movies, and all the things that were acceptable socially at that time that are no longer going to be socially acceptable. Nowadays, and there's no escaping that.
I mean,
and unfortunately, there's just it's there, it's documented, and in order for us to progress as a society, we can't forget about those things.
Yeah, I think that's a mistake.
History is something to be learned from, not to be swept conveniently under the carpet.
Yeah, I mean,
so as long as those things pop up in movies and everything showing what was acceptable back then that's no longer acceptable now, it's a great measuring stick for people to be able to look at and to mentally digest themselves and decide how they want to think about those things.
I mean, I agree with you. The mistake is in trying to erase history, trying to get stuff like that banned. I believe very much like you just kind of stated. The important thing is that we learn from history, that we don't repeat the same mistakes. The fact that people can look at that now and say, okay, but again, I think at the time, like people bring up all the time, well, George Washington was a slave owner. Unfortunately, that was the way of the world back then. I don't think it necessarily means he was a bad, awful person, and we should not teach kids about who he was in history. I mean, you kind of tell the whole story, and to kind of touch a little bit on that before you wrap this episode up. You mentioned back in 1966, the original Star Trek series premiered on NBC, and that's a big deal because Michelle Nichols, who was a star of the original Star Trek series, she recently passed away, but she was, I think, the very first black actress that ever appeared on a primetime TV show, and that's noteworthy because I mean that is even before like Good Times or Maude or Sanford and Son. I mean, Good Times was even like the first kind of time you had a primetime black family, comedy that surrounded a black family. That was kind of new for its time, but Michelle Nichols kind of, I think, she started that all, in 1966 on Star Trek.
Well, a lot of people don't know that also another, very unusual thing was happening. At that time, Lucille Ball was the head of Desilu Studios at that time.
Yeah.
And played a huge part in actually getting Star Trek the support that it needed to actually successfully be shown on TV. She backed it.
Yeah.
She saw the potential of it.
And it was also
and spearheaded getting it on TV. And a lot of people don't know that. She played a big part in that.
Yeah, and she was also the reason they even got a third season. By the second season, they were going to originally cancel, but thanks to Lucille Ball, they got one more season because they not done that third season. They would not have had enough episodes to put it into syndication. And again, Gar, we're going to get ready to wrap this up. Before we do, though, I just want to give people a little more idea what was going on in the world in 1966. The Beatles played their final concert to paying customers of all places at Candlestick Park in San Francisco, and that was August 29th in 1966. And the president of the time, of course, was Lyndon Johnson. And so, about 2 years before, it was the assassination, of course, of President John F. Kennedy. And here's, I think you'll be real interested in this because I know you're a football fan. It was U.S. President Lyndon Johnson who signed into law an antitrust exception allowing the National Football League to merge with the upstart, the American Football League. So, again, if it wasn't for President Lyndon Johnson signing this thing into law, the National Football League might not even be a thing today. So that's kind of interesting.
Yes, and then also Batman, the TV show, with Adam West, that debuted in the same year, 1966.
And I was reading
it was a good time for some very iconic things to happen. The mini skirt, football. The 1960s. It was a time after the 1960s. A lot of things kind of calmed down.
Yeah.
Because it was a very volatile decade. But all the way up until now, things have been calm. But now, it's become, even now. has become even more volatile than the 1960s.
Yeah, and just to put a cap on today's episode, Gar, before we do, music-wise, what was going on in the world? Elvis Presley was popular at the time. The Beatles, we mentioned, were kind of coming to an end. The Beach Boys, I recently seen a book on the Beach Boys that 2022 marks 60th anniversary of the Beach Boys, if you can even believe that. And, of course, the Rolling Stones and the Monkees. Yeah.
Well, in 1966, the Beach Boys released Pet Sounds, which is considered by a lot of people to be. The Beach Boys released it in competition with the Beatles because the Beatles had released Sgt. Pepper's.
Yeah.
And Sgt. Pepper's was such a advanced release in how they mixed like all of these different elements into their music and everything. The presentation and the sound effects and all of these different things that they were doing in Sgt. Pepper's really changed how records were being made. Yeah. And the Beach Boys, felt that the Beatles were their most serious competition. Yeah. Because the Beach Boys were extremely popular at that time too, and so they released Pet Sounds in direct competition to Sgt. Pepper's.
And what I want people to know, Gar, since you brought up the Sgt. Pepper's album, is when I post this next week, I'm going to post an old interview you and I did from about 2 or 3 years ago, specifically talking about the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper album. It's about an hour worth show, but it was a fun show, and why people should listen to that is one of the interviews that kind of launched us to do what we're doing now with Gar Borras' Time Machine, and that was a great interview. And before we finally wrap it up today, I want to let people know when we get together in 2 more weeks, we're going to be doing one of Gar's all-time favorite kind of Thanksgiving films, which is the film Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, of course, starring the late John Candy and Steve Martin. It is one of those films that it just is great to have kind of a film for Thanksgiving time. And as I was sharing with Gar last night when I went to see the movie Black Adam, they had that people can go see Planes, Trains, and Automobiles on November 6th and 7th. So check your local theater. I think that's something I'm going to do because I just it's a different experience, I think, seeing it in the theater than it is watching it at home.
Well, there's definitely a different experience of watching a movie in the theater. It really changes the dynamics when you're sharing the experience with other people in the audience. Sometimes it can be a better experience. A lot of times it's a better experience, but every once in a while there's always somebody in the audience that's got to turn it into a horrible experience. Yeah. But most of the times it really is a better experience, and there really is something to be said about seeing a movie in the theater because of that, but also seeing a movie at the drive-in. Oh yeah. Because even though when I was doing it as a kid back in the 1960s, and they had those horrible speakers that you attached to your window and rolled it up to hold it in place. Even though they had that, it still was a great experience as a child going to see a movie at the drive-in. Everybody sitting in the car with your parents and watching a movie. Yeah, I remember that. That's something I miss doing. I wish they would bring that back. But Gar Borras, once again. Going to the snack shack and doing all that stuff. It's very warm childhood memories that I hold very dearly. Me too, my friend. Well, Gar, once again, it was great doing this. If you could hold on for just a minute, I'd like to talk to you off air. Thank you, my friend.
Chaotic Riffs Magazine.